Okay, this is going to be a fun one. We're even going to bring Dave Ramsey into it because he has a lot to say about whether or not gold or silver can protect you during an economic collapse. And maybe gold or silver can't protect Dave in that kind of event, but Dave seems a little soft. Maybe he's really saying gold and silver alone can't save you because you might have to deal with bad water, bad food, and bad guys. Maybe even tigers. We don't know how bad things could get. And between us, I doubt Dave could outrun a tiger. Planning against some kind of fallout, buying gold and silver as maybe a preparation against it, was a fun thought experiment. And okay, sure, it drifts into fantasy doom and danger, maybe some horrible things happening all around us, but look, we're kind of wired to think about these things, and worrying about something keeps us on our toes. And since we don't have tigers on the loose, most places at least, raiding marauders don't happen to be a thing, we have to find other things to worry about. Like how we might survive an apocalypse. I mean, zombies, EMPs, complete economic collapse, global meltdown, you name it. Well, I think this kind of planning hits somewhere on a scale between good old-fashioned rational planning and straight up crazy. So I figured we'd lay out a scoring grid to tell us where we fall based on our plans with gold and silver. Before we get back to it, if you're looking for gold or silver, check out SD Bullion. New customers even get gold and silver for spot. It's sdbullion.com/new. Now, the problem with me telling you if your plans are crazy or if you're crazy is that even though we're all friends here, I might be a little bit too forgiving when it comes to gold and silver. So I figured what we do here is channel some advice from a guy with well-known opinions on gold and silver, somebody who isn't afraid to call you names for stacking it. I figured we could use some of the labels that we've been able to pick up from his answers to poor souls calling in for advice on the matter and put together a scoring grid for our own plans here. The person I'm talking about, of course, is Dave Ramsey. Now, Dave is a longtime opponent of owning gold or silver, at least from what we can tell. He has said the only reason to buy gold or silver is because you're either afraid or you're greedy. You're an idiot if you spend too much, a loser if you lack proper planning, and a moron if you just plain won't listen. Now, in fairness, he gives advice to help you stop being a loser and an idiot. It's up to you to decide if you want to follow it. Now, if you're a moron, you might just be stuck. I'm not really sure. We aren't going to go full Dave Ramsey. You never go full Ramsey, as they say. We're just going to say Dave. Could be any Dave. What we're going to take from Dave is a sense of whether we're spending too much or we lack proper planning, or God forbid, we're just morons. The part that I think real Dave Ramsey misses, though, is that you can prepare for some kind of economic apocalypse in the same way that you can prepare for a run-of-the-mill personal financial scare. You can convert the metal back to currency in the event you need it. You can convert it back in the event you don't need it. The risk here is that if you take it too far, you might not be able to convert it back. Maybe you wait too long, you let the situation get too bad, or you're just plain stubborn. And you probably know who you are. So what we're going to do here is map out 4 quadrants: idiots, losers, morons, and then just nothing under the radar. These are Dave's labels. Remember, they're not mine. And like I said, I'm more forgiving when it comes to gold and silver than Dave. I'm also younger and better looking too. So I'm going to give a second look at the end of this. I'm going to give my take on whether I think his labels are fair. Before we get into the name calling, though, I need to set Dave Ramsey straight on something. Dave mentions the stock market has averaged annual growth of nearly 12% over the past decade, but gold has averaged 3.6%. Now, these are outdated figures. I don't know if they were true at some point. Maybe they were. But to make sure that we know the actual numbers, gold was $1,200 in 2014, 10 years ago. So the annual appreciation of gold over those 10 years is right around 7.5%. Now, for the stock market figure, let's assume he means the S&P. Over the past 10 years, annual returns are right around 10.2%. Now, if you happen to hold stock in companies within the S&P 500 that pay dividends, it'll be a little bit higher. So I'm not trying to say that the S&P 500 won't outperform gold. I just want these numbers on the record because I think Dave's arguments are less compelling when the numbers are correct. The other thing that I need to clear up here before we get into this is the idea of intrinsic value. Dave says gold and silver have none. They're worth what people are willing to give you for them. He says the same goes for paper bills with dead presidents on them, which is true, but gold and silver have value in other currencies around the world. So the dollar or your local currency, they can lose value without taking gold and silver with it. This is a very important point, and I think Dave misses it. Okay, let's go for real. We have two axes here. The horizontal axis is how much gold or silver you have set aside for an emergency. It's pretty straightforward. If you have an ounce of gold for an emergency situation, you're going to be on the left of this scale. If you have 50 or 100 or more, you're on the right. The vertical axis is going to be how willing you are to convert your metals back to cash. Now, most of us have gold or silver for multiple uses. You can use an emergency fund for a health issue the same way that you could for a global financial crisis. So if your sole use case is for guns and groceries, muscle cars and consorts in some kind of Mad Max world, you're going to be at the top of this grid. And if you're open to selling your metals at any time, really, you're going to be toward the bottom of it. So let's get some actual examples in here. I have said before that 3 ounces of gold will cover most unexpected emergencies. That amount would place us to the left of the grid, and in this case, let's say that we have a willingness to use it in any kind of personal emergency. This, of course, is pulling from the example that I use here a lot. This would put us in the lower left quadrant, and I would say this is a safe zone. I don't think Dave has a name for any of us here in this quadrant. So far, so good. Now, I initially wanted 3 ounces for an unexpected emergency. So that dot in the safe zone, that was me. That was early on, maybe 15 years ago. Well, my emergency fund increased to 6, and then to 12 ounces, then to 24, and then to 48. That's 2 ounces a month for 3, 6, 12, or 24 months. I rounded it to 50. So now that example is going to put us at a point a lot further to the right, but it's still meant for an emergency use. Any emergency that I have, I'll sell out of it if and when I need it. So that would put me in the lower right quadrant. Now, according to Dave, that makes me an idiot. 50 ounces of gold is $120,000 in non-apocalypse currency, so I've spent too much. Dave would say I'm an idiot. Now, if you have 3 ounces of gold again, but you will never sell it, you have it as a barter for some kind of zombie apocalypse, or you're holding it to buy a house or 3 in a Weimar Republic type collapse, well, you're in the upper left quadrant. And Dave says you're a loser. You lack a proper plan if you never intend to liquidate that gold. You're just wasting it, so shame on you. And then finally, let's say you have 50 ounces of gold or more, like my personal example, but you have it buried in your rose garden. You're never going to sell it unless society falls, in which case you'll dig it up and you'll be a king of the post-apocalypse. Well, that's going to put you in the upper right quadrant, and Dave, or our somewhat made-up version of Dave, would say, you're a moron. You've spent too much and you lack proper planning, so you're both an idiot and a loser. Put that together, and I guess that makes you a moron. Dave's word, not mine. Now what? Well, I guess we're going to let that sting sit in a little bit, but I told you that I was going to take a second pass at this from the eyes of a younger, better-looking, more forgiving perspective. But first, I need to say a word about silver, because I didn't put it on the grid to begin with. Realistically here, silver has been a bad investment. I'm just calling it as it is. That's over the past 50 years. It's been a questionable savings model at best for me, but man, does it get credit for being the thing you need in an SHTF situation. And hey, I think it does have a few use cases. Early into a situation, I think people might even trade for it. And lacking a stable alternative, who knows? But I don't think the acceptance of either metal, gold or silver, would have much staying power as money in a wide-scale event. That's assuming you can't just trade it out for another currency. So for the purposes of plotting your silver ownership on this grid, I'm going to give silver a multiple of 20. That's rather than the 80-to-1 gold to silver ratio that we'd get if we went off the current gold to silver price. So 60 ounces of silver would put you by the 3 ounces of gold. 1,000 ounces puts you next to the 50. Top or bottom is the same. It depends on your willingness to use it. So idiot, loser, moron, or safe, all of that works the same way. So let's clean this up and get some counseling for the idiots and the losers in the group. If we were to go back to my earlier stat, we heard gold has been appreciating annually at 7.5%. For the past decade. So Saving it over the past decade has meant getting far better returns on my gold savings than I got on my cash savings. So if I'm thinking of it as an appreciating asset that I can or would use, it would be hard to call me or you an idiot for spending too much on it, because in my case at least, I'm simply saving with it. I don't know anyone stacking gold in the expectation that they'll be a king in some kind of fantasy apocalypse. Now, I'm sure there are a few of you out there, we'll get to you in a minute, but most of us just see it as a better alternative savings model. Diversification. Maybe Dave would say that you're an idiot for spending too much on it, but you didn't actually spend anything on it. Gold and silver convertible. The only thing you've spent money on is the amount that's gone to premiums. For the losers in the group, I imagine most people with no plans to ever sell their gold or silver plan to at least hand it down to future generations. Now, if you want it to be part of your estate, a loser is probably the last thing that you are. I think that it's actually pretty damn generous, pretty thoughtful, kind of the opposite of being a loser. There are actually tax reasons that you might want to do this. The capital gains factor is reduced on inheritance because the cost basis steps up to the time of death. So as far as taxes go, I'm not really sure what we're losing. Now, if you got the moron label, stacking large amounts of gold and silver truly with no plan to use it outside of some kind of wide-scale economic collapse, well, don't worry, this isn't an intervention. This is a safe place. I don't think you're a moron, but between friends, your plans, hey, they might be a little bit crazy. Some of us do have more than 50 ounces of gold. Some of us have more than 1,000 ounces of silver. Some of you, I don't, but a few of us might even have no plan to ever liquidate any part of it. Now, depending on where you fall here, maybe some of the things that Dave Ramsey says about gold and silver owners, they might even be fair. In one of his videos, Dave says the only reason people run to gold or silver is fear or greed. So maybe a backup fund based on fear of some kind of emergency is fear. Maybe saving for opportunity capital has something to do with greed. But hey, look, in that same video, Dave has just told the caller that he has $100 million in assets. And look, that's pretty impressive, Dave. I'm not judging here, but I would guess that you need a little bit of greed to get to that point. So mean names and labels aside, the first case that I gave, 3 ounces of gold, that to me seems like a reasonable prep for some kind of unexpected crash. I would even go so far as to say that I can see stacking that and forgetting about it. I mean, never convert that amount back. So a few tubes of silver eagles, same thing. 40 ounces of silver, hard to call that wasteful. The second case I give around here, an emergency backup fund, most of us probably plan to convert that back to cash if and when we need it. While it's sidelined, like I mentioned, it is outperforming cash, at least if we look back the past 10 years. I'm assuming that will continue, and if we never need it, maybe it goes to our kids. Still seems reasonable. Now, personally, I've gone beyond that. I have gold that I don't consider sidelined only for an emergency, so I've spent more than 50 ounces spent, according to Dave. But I'll convert that back to cash if and when I decide I don't need it. Maybe I do want it for some kind of opportunity like a land purchase. I don't know. Does this make me a little bit crazy? Does this make me a moron? Maybe, but so far it's done well. I think Dave Ramsey probably does have some good advice, and I like hearing opinions that don't necessarily line up with my own. Makes me take a second look at what I'm doing. So realistically, I'd have to plot parts of my gold and silver holdings into each of those 4 quadrants. So to some extent, I'm safe, I'm an idiot, I'm a little bit of a loser, and maybe I'm a moron, but my goal would be to keep as much as I can outside the moron quadrant. Now, I don't mind the label. I know if I ever do decide to bury it all in the rose garden, at least I'll have to deal with a little bit of shame. Maybe that will make me think, hey, I didn't really think this through, and maybe it's time to get Dave on the phone. Okay, let's call it good there. Let's get some hands. Are you safe, an idiot, a loser, or a moron? Let us know. I think admitting you have a problem is the first step. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.